All right. There's this huge delay between me starting the stream now and when YouTube seems to pick things up. But anyway, we're here once more for a stream of Odinmade Hero, the programming stream where I learn from Casey Muratori's Handmade Hero, one day at a time, how to make a game from scratch. While he does it in C and C++, I'm over here doing it in Odin. And on day 78, which was Wednesday, I was working on, he was working on how to handle collision between entities based on these collision volumes, which I think I can actually highlight somewhere around here. Yeah, these collision volume and volume group ideas here. And just checking, to see when an entity can collide with another entity, if it's based on these different pieces of it, how that looks, and thinking about how to do that, where we wound up adding, what was it? It was like in volume, in something, volume in entity collision volume. So now we added this code here to just work off of each piece of the entity rather than just some, nondescript or I guess less descriptive notion of what parts of the entity can collide with stuff in 3D space. So it's just this continual refining of the idea of what it means for our 2D game to have some understanding of a 3D collision space, so that, for example, if we go to our big list of to-dos here, make it so that we can have things like this happening, where if, let's say, and I don't know that this is actually something that ever gets added, but it might be a fun thing to try and implement myself down the road. We wanted our hero to be able to duck below some cover while some mobs are shooting arrows or bullets or, throwing rocks at him, whatever. Maybe we want to be able to duck behind cover. And then, if you pop up over the cover, the lower half of you is protected, but if a monster or whatever, some other entity throws something and it goes over that wall, you want to be able to have the hero be punished for making that mistake, and vice versa. You want to be able to throw things at entities just the same. So stuff like that. We were talking about it on Wednesday, where it's this thing like a lot of the work in games is just hidden. It's invisible. And that's definitely true for a lot of the stuff that's been going on recently. But thankfully, we're getting pretty close to being able to just focus on some visual stuff for a while. So that'll be fun. So that being said, we can go ahead and jump into day 79, where we're going to be defining the ground more clearly, because that's something that's been just kind of getting kicked around. It's a can that keeps on getting kicked down, as Casey kept on trying to figure out how to flesh this stuff out. So I'll go ahead and let him kick things off for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live on Twitch. No libraries, no engine, it's just us. And we are going through all every little last piece that makes up a game, from the thing that puts the pixels on the screen all the way up to the artificial intelligence that runs the enemies and that sort of stuff. Basically, the entire gamut. And, it's been a lot of fun doing it so far. I'm having a good time. I hope everyone else is having a good time, because honestly, we just show no signs of stopping. We're just barreling through, and speaking of barreling through, we are in the middle of doing some collision detection updates, and specifically what we've been working on recently is extending our notion of what the world is and how you move around it into 3 dimensions, so that basically we can have a 2D game, which is our goal, but that it handles 3D in a rich way, so that anything that we want to do in the game world that needs a little more concept of height to it will be able to work well and not have to have a ton of hacks piled on it. So we're basically kind of going through that, sort of putting it in and perhaps doing those hacks early now, so that we can see what they look like and then start to pull them apart and go, okay, how can we make this more general, more complete, easier to use for the code that will have to use it, that's going to be layered on top of it, and really kind of nail that down. So where we've come to is we're actually in a pretty good spot with that stuff, but we have one major concern left in terms of our representation of the world that we want to iron out, and that's what we're going to be starting on tonight. And that is that we don't currently have any real philosophy behind how we're representing where the ground is. And you know, in a straightforward 2D game that has absolutely no interesting depth effects in it whatsoever, there really isn't any notion of where the ground is. You're just moving sprites around on a plane, and you never really think about the concept that there's this depth to it. But we want a game that is more advanced than that, and we want to be able to have layers on top of layers in the world, so we can have multi-story rooms or towers or you know, ledges, that sort of thing. And we want those things to work intelligently, and furthermore, we want to be able to have gameplay and rendering that work seamlessly across these. So if you want to be fighting someone on a stairwell, we want that to work. If you're going to be fighting someone from a ledge that's 2 stories high, like a giant monster, we want that to work. And we want you to know that you're hitting him like up in his head as opposed to if you were down there and hitting him at his feet if you were on the lower level or something, right? We want all that stuff to be represented sort of in a nice, unified, clean way. And we've done that for most of the things, but what we don't have now is just how do we know what sort of the walkable area is when there's stuff on, you know, if we're going to have these multiple layers, how do we know what's walkable? And there's a number of ways we can solve that problem. I'm not sure what the best one is, so what we're going to start doing today is drilling into that and figuring out what we need to do to tackle that problem. Okay, before I get started, if you have been following along at home, if you've pre-ordered the game on handmadehero.org, you should have gotten a link in your email, and that link has the source code in it. If you want to follow along at home, unpack the source code for day 78 from the source code zip file. And that is what we'll be starting with here on day 79. So if you want to follow along with me, that's the way to do it. All right, so let's probably, I think we almost don't even need to fire up the editor yet. I'll do it anyway, but really this is going to be a little bit of a Blackboard discussion at the outset because we need to sort of decide what it is we're doing here. I'll briefly check our to-do list just to make sure there wasn't something I wanted to do before talking about any of this, but I don't really think that there was. I think for the most part, yeah, we basically got, we could go do this the ground collision loop stuff, but I think maybe doing the ground, getting a handle on the ground first before we try to solidify this is actually going to be the right order to do things in, because I feel like getting our ground concept in the collision loop straightened out would be helped if we had a notion of exactly how we want to handle the ground in general, since those two things are kind of interrelated, and this one's kind of the more sort of systemic picture. So let's talk about this for a second. I was thinking about this a little bit today. I'm not really sure why. Just like I said, a lot of times stuff just pops into my head. That's stuff I've been working on. So let's see here. Where are we? We're day 79, right? All right. So here on day 79, let's talk about the ground. The ground. The ground round. It's the ground that's around us. I don't know if you guys had. Do you ever have that restaurant? It was called the Ground Round. I don't even know if they exist anymore. They probably don't. They were a Massachusetts thing. I think they existed outside of Massachusetts. I think they were, you know, at least East Coast or at least New England, but I don't really know. Anyway, don't think it was a particularly good restaurant. Probably. I don't know. I don't even know if I ever ate there. But you know, what can we say? You know, I'm sorry I even wrote the ground. It's bringing up things that just aren't relevant. Anyway, let me start by talking about the thing that I thought of today. It's a little bit of game history. And I felt like it had something to say about how we might handle our ground problem. And that is sort of the Quake versus Unreal model, right? Now, I'm not talking about the game Quake versus the game Unreal, which is what it would be if this were a title in a game magazine where they're going to be like, X is awesomer than Y because of some reason. I'm actually talking about how they constructed their worlds. And if you remember, well, probably a lot of you maybe were too young to remember, but the way that these games used to work is they used to use something called constructive solid geometry, right? So constructive solid geometry is this notion that we sort of build the world out of these things. They call them brushes, oftentimes, which is a really bad name. Really what they are is polytopes, some kind of shape in 3D space. You know, like maybe I've got something that's kind of like a little thing that I'm going to create here, and it's some polytope or whatever, right? You know, maybe it's got a little hidden line surface.
I don't know if I've ever even heard that word before, polytope. This probably isn't the same thing that I was talking about in a much earlier stream than this one, but because it had to do with Doom. And I think actually the guy that wrote the game engineering black book for Doom, I think he might have done a very similar one for Quake, but I brought it up before with Doom where it was like it was just a particular algorithm or equation for splitting, and I think Casey actually has mentioned it before, this, you know, prior to this day as well, where the geometry of a level is like sliced up until there are no more concave pieces, and they're all convex. It's either you have nothing but convex or you have nothing but concave pieces left, and I always forget which is which. But then that way it makes it really easy to know which things to draw. But this is probably only partially related to that anyways, because we're talking about collision detection anyways, right? But it's related.
sampler. And what I do is I like stamp this down and I say whether this is an empty region that I'm carving out or whether it's a filled region that I'm filling in. And so the way that you created the world is you might say, okay, like I want to make a room that has some pillars in it, and I have like one of these brushes, right, that's like, you know, a thing that looks like this or whatever, and that's like my really lousy column, but I'm gonna stamp that around in like a couple different places to make a room that has like 3 pillars in it or whatever, right? And it's called constructive solid geometry because there actually was a notion of inside and outside of these things. They were closed, bounded solids that actually existed as solid geometry, unlike in modern games where oftentimes there's sort of a, something that's typically called a polygon soup, right? Polygon soup is when you just have some bunch of triangles that an artist made that doesn't necessarily have any notion of inside and outside. There could be holes in it, there could be cracks in it, there could be just fins sticking off it, like what a tree might have for leaves, things that don't represent a bounded solid. And so this constructed solid geometry was sort of a more robust definition of a world, if you will, than what we often use today with the polygon soup way. Because this was actually creating a world that always had a consistent notion of what was solid and what was inside and outside of the world, what was empty space and what was filled space, right? And so both of these games actually use the constructive solid geometry approach. Obviously, it was pioneered by John Carmack in the game industry space, and people followed suit, including the folks who made Unreal. But they picked different paradigms when they actually made their level editors. So the Quake's way of doing things was to start filled and carve, right? So the definition of the world was that the entire world is a giant filled block, basically. Everywhere is solid. And then the way that you make a world is you start carving out. So if you imagine, like if we did this in 2D, I've just got this giant solid block, almost like I'm, some kind of a sculptor. And the first thing I do is start to carve out a room. So maybe I carve out a room that I'm going to create here. And then, I go ahead and I carve out another room, right? And then maybe even a hallway in between those rooms. And what I've got now is I've got a definition of where is empty space because it's everywhere that I've carved out. And anywhere that I haven't carved out is solid, right? And it's worth noting that there was nothing that said that you always had to carve out. You could then add a brush in that was designed to fill and refill in back some area. So you could always add and subtract, but you started with everything being solid. Unreal, on the other hand, was the opposite. Unreal started empty and filled, right? And so the way that they would do things is they would say, well, the universe is a giant open space. And so if you wanted to make a room, what you would actually do is you'd actually place wall brushes around the room that you were trying to make, and they would fill it in. So now you would never get this sort of thing. You'd get this sort of thing where there's empty space all throughout all of here, and there's empty space on the inside, and then there's just a solid boundary that encases things, right? And these are very different ways of doing it. Now, this was a very long time ago, and I'm quite sure that the Unreal Engine of today bears no resemblance to this at all. I'm sure that people don't even use constructive solid geometry anymore. I'm not sure when that went away, but it was probably sometime in 2005. Most things that were using constructive solid geometry started to stop, or had stopped, I should say. But from 1995's development cycles through 2000 and somethings, this was still an active way that things were done. And even in some Quake legacy engines like Half-Life, the concept that there was constructive solid geometry underlying the game actually persisted for quite some time. I strongly suspect that Half-Life 2 may even have shipped still with all of that kind of in the underpinnings of it, and it wasn't until later that they actually finally got rid of like the last vestiges of this concept and moved over to more of a polygon soup-based representation. But so given that fact, I want to talk about the difference between these two things, right? So I want to talk.
Well, I only just realized that this is a heavy blackboarding day. It's okay with me, but we're going to be in for like another 20 minutes or so of this.
About the difference between this model, where the thing that I say is that we have emptiness, and this model, which is to say that I specify the filled part, and there's emptiness on the inside and the outside. So, and we'll say this is the Unreal way, and this is the Quake way. Right? So what I remember at the time being an important reason why I liked this method better, the Quake method, is because it meant you could never accidentally fall out of the world, right? The world is completely solid. And so anywhere that you could move through had to be something that someone actually carved out at some point, right? Whereas in the Unreal method, it was actually pretty easy for some level designer to maybe not quite realize what had happened, and when they were making stuff, they made something that looked like this, right? And there really was a little hole here that was just big enough for a player jumping at the right angle at the right time or whatever to fit through and end up outside the world where they would fall infinitely forever, never really hitting anything until maybe they hit some, I don't know if Unreal had some kind of a catch-all kind of thing that would happen, but this is, they would be outside the world. But you could never get outside the world in Quake because there was nothing outside the world. The world was actually solid. So the only things that you could move through were things that some level designer had actually carved out. And again, this is the very early days. So all of this stuff may have changed with, say, Quake 2, Unreal 2, right? Like, so I'm talking about early, like the original versions of the level editors of these two things. And so this may be an important lesson for us to take away from gaming history and say, well, as I've said multiple times on the stream, I am hesitant to make something where we specify where the ground is. And the reason that I was hesitant to do that is because most of the time there is ground, and a lot of the stuff that we need to specify is just where ground isn't, right? And so that's the route that I was kind of taking in my head because I thought it would be more efficient or whatever. But efficiency is an interesting concern, but I tend to rank them more this way. I tend to want this first and then this second in terms of playability concerns. Like if there's a chance that the player could encounter a game-breaking bug, I'm probably not going to do the efficient thing that might introduce that bug or that makes me concerned that I might have that bug. I'm going to prioritize robustness first and accept a less performant game in exchange for not having that game-breaking bug. Now, again, games are extraordinarily complicated. Will we be able to ship Handmade Hero with no game-breaking bugs? Probably not. Has anyone ever even done that? I don't know. But that doesn't mean we don't try, right? Even though we're doing something very complicated, I feel like it still helps to prioritize because we'll have, at the very least, if we have a mindset for it, we'll at least have less, and the chance that a player encounters a serious bug that ruins their play session will be much less. And so that matters a lot to me because I really don't like players to have to go through that. And I realize this is actually fairly rare of a prioritization. I don't see a lot of game industry programming focusing on that, and so I don't pretend to speak for the industry at large in that way, but that's just my personal opinion. And so what that means...
Totally different domain, but what I do... for all of my other projects is I make sure that everything works to the fullest extent of what my understanding of working is supposed to mean. So I try not to do anything half-baked where I know that there's some series of events that could take place that would leave the user in a bad place, because I've had way too many bad experiences being in that exact situation myself. And so I just try to think of all those things and do all that. And then let's say a result from a search or some other kind of action is not as fast as it could be. I do tend to worry about that later. But what I'm doing is generally the terms for what robustness means are a lot less complicated than they are in this case. But that could just be perspective. That could just be relative to my own experience. I know Casey has enough experience with web programming to know that he hates it. I have enough experience with it to know that I also hate it, but I'm also good at sidestepping or circumventing a lot of the parts about it, which I don't like having to deal with. So yeah, it's all just your opinion, man, at the end of the day.
For me is that maybe I should rethink the way that I was thinking about the ground, and that I really don't want to do the most efficient thing there, and instead want to focus on something that will be as robust as possible and minimize the chances that the player can ever find themselves in an unwanted circumstance, such as getting outside of the world, like this case. So what that led me to consider, and what I'm going to propose now is perhaps what we could try for ground, is instead of thinking of ground, or floors even, because someone yesterday had suggested maybe if the ground was like a solid, like it was had depth instead of just being a plane, right? What I'm thinking is maybe we turn this around a little bit, and maybe we say that we're not going to talk about ground, and we're not going to talk about floors. What we're going to talk about is rooms. So what we will do is we will place regions in 3D space that we consider to be walkable, space you can move around in. So, it's not solid, it's empty. We're specifying the empty space, and the player stands on the empty space. If they would have fallen through into non-empty space, that is where the ground is. So the ground is just somewhere that if you were to go below it, you would no longer be inside one of these empty space regions. And so what our world would look like at that point is a series of overlapping empty spaces which form the continuous area that the player can move through. And they are always also subject to collision with entities like our trees or other things like that. But they can never, the collision detection will literally never allow them to be placed in any circumstance where they would be outside of one of these regions. It will literally be impossible. So at the end of the time step, it is just going to be a hard guarantee in our collision loop that you are not allowed to be placed in a location that would be outside it. And if for some reason we detect that that's true, we disallow the move. So we won't allow you to actually do your move if it would have put you outside as a failsafe. So even if for some reason the collision messes up, would have put you outside one of these things, we just say that's not allowed, right? And so our definition for ground at that point is going to be something along the lines of, if this is a side view and we have two overlapping things here, and we do something like this, then that's okay. If we do something like this, and I don't know, maybe we'll collision detect against it too, but I'm not sure if we want to do that or not. We may not need to because collision detection may just be for entities. Who knows? But something like this would not be, because this puts you outside it, and that would project you back up kind of into the place where you're allowed to actually stand. And so I think I'm leaning towards doing this method, and the reason that I'm leaning towards this is because I think it provides us an extra level of sort of fail-safeness. I don't know how you want to say it. It provides us an extra layer of robustness, let's say, where we're gonna have some insulation that will catch if we forgot to put a tree in some place and the player can walk outside of it. There's still at least an invisible wall that will prevent them from walking out and falling into nowhere or walking out into nothingness. It wouldn't be as good as if we always obviously didn't have that problem, but it would at least give us some notion of sort of containment. And we could also do something where instead of those walls being invisible, we could do something where if you are outside of that region, we draw in some placeholder pattern that's like trees or rocks or whatever, so that it even looks kind of okay in the case where there's a problem, right? And so I feel like this is a pretty good solution. I think it's probably something that I'd like to pursue first. And so what that means is that our definition of ground is going to just be a very simple, very basic game-style probe where at any point we will simply look downwards from where that point is, and we will see where the first place is where you would pass out of one of these regions into space that was not considered empty, right? So the first place that you would pass out of one of these regions and not into another region, right? And so it's a little bit tricky. I haven't thought through exactly how to do that part of it yet, and the reason is it's very easy to do that kind of a check for just, for a box, whether we're leaving it or staying in it. It's exactly the same as what we did in the collision detection, right? But the thing that's a little more confusing is that you're allowed to leave a face of this box as long as there's some other box that encloses this other area, right? And so it's a little confusing because I guess what we need to do is every time, I'm just thinking this through, if you imagine we have these boxes, we just see which box you are inside, and then when we do our raycast, we're raycasting against that box. When you leave that box, we would then do another query to see what box you would be inside, right? And if there isn't one, then that's a collision point, and you would have to stop there. If there is one, then we simply change to doing casting against that box. Now, the reason why I say it's not immediately, it's not necessarily 100% clear, is because you can imagine some relatively complicated scenarios. Like, let's say I have two boxes, right? And I'm trying to get outside of them. Well, if I constantly did this query, if these two ended right on that line, I might oscillate back and forth between them and never escape out of it, right? I might be like, oh, collide against this box. Okay, I'm leaving this box. What box am I in? Like this is box A and this is box B. Oh, I'm in box A. I collide against the wall of box A. I leave that wall. I find what new box I'm in. It says I'm in box B. I'm in box B. I do the collide. It collides against this wall. I leave that wall. It says I'm now in box A, and I just can go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, right? And that is exactly the kind of thing that happens with kind of the fiddly math of collision detection if you're not careful. And so I do think that maybe we will have to kind of think it through a little bit to see what is the most elegant way we can reduce that sort of process to something that doesn't have a lot of nasty failure cases like that. Obviously, we can cap the iteration count very trivially and make it so that we don't have like an infinite loop bug or anything like that, but we may have a bug where there was actually another box and you could have gotten further through it and you simply couldn't. One way, even as I draw it, I'm kind of thinking about what it would be, and I'm kind of thinking maybe, here's the thought bubble, maybe the answer is, pick the box with the furthest dot. And what I mean by that is, let's say I'm exiting this and I want to pick the new box that I'm going to travel along. What I could do is say, well, what if I took this vector, right, that I'm moving along, and I said, which of these boxes has a point whose dot product is the largest along the direction of the vector that I'm traveling? Because that would eliminate these kinds of vectors there, right? Because they're never going to be further than, say, this guy, right? And I don't know, that has some promise, right? That's the dot product of this on this is going to be like here. But of course, the dot product on here is going to be here, so it's a little bit hard to say. The dot product may not be the best choice for us to think about this. I feel like there should be some kind of measure. I mean, I guess what we could do is, it's more expensive, but we could just run the intersection test. So basically what we would do is we do an intersection, we find that we're leaving a region. So then we do an intersection test on all of the boxes that we now are inside and see which one of those was actually furthest, right? That seems pretty straightforward. I don't know how expensive it'll be, but that seems pretty reasonable. So it's something like, for each box we're inside, right, pick furthest intersection. And so in some sense, this is the exact opposite of our current collision loop, right? Our current collision loop is pick the earliest collision, because that's trying to stop you from moving. And this is the opposite. This is trying to allow us to move. And so now that I think about it, we actually could basically just perform that constructed solid geometry in the collision detector, right? We have some number of boxes. Yeah, see if you're with me on this. We have some number of boxes that are marked as in.
Can can guarantee I am not with him on this, but he's really problem solving as he's going here. And so I think he's, at this point now, he may have arrived at a good explanation, not just for himself, but to the listener about how to reason about this. Because like now we've moved so far away from like what the actual problem it is we're talking about that I don't even remember specifically what it is.
Boxes, right? And so these are in boxes. We have some number of boxes that are out boxes, right? And these are our entities that we're colliding with. When our collision detector goes to do its collision detection, could we not simply say that we have two t's values, essentially, right? Or not even two t values. We just have one t value for the intersection, right? No, sorry. We have two t values. We have our t for in boxes and our t for out boxes, right? And the t for in boxes and the t for out boxes are both, I guess what I would say is the t for in boxes, they operate in exactly the opposite fashion. For in boxes, we set the t to be right at 0. So the t for in boxes is 0 at the start. The t for out boxes, right, is 1 at the start. It's the furthest we could move. Then for each of the things that we are checking against, we say, is it an inbox or is it an outbox? If it's an outbox, we do what we were doing before. We do our collision detection. We see whether the collision with it happens at a t that is less than the one that we have, and if it is, we accept that as the new t for outboxes. So this is starting at 1, and it's moving towards 0 with each collision, right? It's getting closer and closer to 0 with each collision, and the closest thing that we hit, we know that that is as far as we could go before we hit something. The t for inboxes is the opposite. It's going to go ahead and say for every box that we are inside, right? See how far we could go. What's the first intersection with one of those boxes' walls?
I can see where he's driving towards now, but I don't know if in and out is the way that I would choose to think about it. I mean, you're either going in, it's T starting in or T starting out. I guess you can think of it like that. I guess I off the top of my head, I cannot think of a better way to describe this. In and out just doesn't feel quite right. It's more like near and far, wet and dry. That's further away. But near and far seems pretty. Yeah, I like near and far better.
And that moves toward 1.
T near, T far, right?
Right. So that gets higher and higher. So the furthest out we could go, that's the one we pick. We then have these two t values, and we say whichever one is minimum, right? So we take the smaller of the two. That will give us our collision. It will give us the collision that tells us how far we went, right? And it seems to me, I could be wrong about this, but it seems to me that is essentially a complete solution, perhaps for our ground problem as well. I don't actually know if that's true. I'd have to think about that. I mean, essentially, ground could just be thought of as after you do your lateral movement, we just move you down however much, so, you move, this is a side view again, you move sideways, and then after you're dumping sideways, we move you down as far as you can go. Collision detection as well. So we basically have two collision steps, moving you laterally and then moving you sort of down. I don't know if we would want to try to do something fancier where we tried to do movement in sort of a more sensible fashion. This is where collision detection gets kind of wonky. Again, I tried to solve this stuff in the witness using a much more odd scheme than what we're working with here. I'm trying to do a more traditional collision detection scheme here because I feel like this game will not require such heavy artillery. But that does come with the fact that certain things are a bit odd. And so, for example, movement on ramps, when you're coming up to the ramp, what happens when you're kind of coming up the ramp here? When do we kind of re-put you back down on that ramp, right? And so, I don't know. I don't know exactly how we want to handle that, and I don't know exactly how we want to look at some of these things. But for the most part, since almost all of our motion happens laterally in that way, we could pretty easily just say that is how we're going to do things. Now, we have another question to answer, and this is a gameplay question. So I'm feeling relatively good about this. This seems pretty solid. Let's see, we're probably taking a lot of time here. We're a half hour in, and all we've done is talk. But sometimes you got to talk it out. You got to talk it out. So we have one other question to answer, and that is this one. What happens when you step off a ledge, right? So if I'm here and I walk off here, do I fall down, or do I stop, right? And I don't know the answer to that question. It seems like we might want to let you fall down. Because if this actually were constructed, we'll think about the case where this would happen, right? We're not talking about something where we've constructed a room and then we have, you know, some bottomless pit in it, right? Because if that were the case, we could just mark this. This wouldn't be carved out as empty space. We'd mark this as actually a collider so that you can't walk into the bottomless pit, right? So we're not really talking about that case. We're talking about a different case. We're talking about the case where you can see, you know, a Monstar down here or whatever, and you're up here. And the question is, do we let you hop down there? And I mean, it seems like the natural thing to do. And if we didn't want you to, it seems silly to complicate the collision detector by making it have to think about this. So we could just put a synthetic collider over the top of it that was raised up, and so that you would just hit it, you know? So I feel like the answer is, for this, don't care, right? We don't care about this. We're not going to handle that case. We're just going to let you fall, and you fall down to whatever the ground is that's underneath you, always, right?
It would be super annoying otherwise. Like, whenever you have that experience in a game, unless like falling off the ledge would mean falling off the world, then I should always be able to jump down, because it's always going to be a shortcut to where I need to go. And I'm also thinking of this in like terms of even if it would make me fall out of the world, just let me die. Like, that's part of the fun of goofing around in a game. It's just like jumping off of tall places and watching the ragdoll effects. You know what I mean?
That seems like a pretty reasonable thing. So I guess what we would say is, yeah, basically, let's do this. Let's do exactly this. And so we'll have it so that you can, yeah, let's do exactly this. We're going to do this exact algorithm that I described, and we're going to say that afterwards we do a probe downward to place you on whatever the first thing is that you would have hit. How does that sound? Is everyone down with that? I don't know if everyone's down with that or not. It takes too long for me to wait as well to see whether people are down with it, because of course there's the Twitch lag and so on, so I have to kind of wait and see, oh, what's going on? So I don't know. But it seems to me like that is a sensible way to go. So I think that's what I will do. I think that is what's going to happen. So let's see. Let us see. I am going to start by making those room cutouts, because that seems like the most sensible thing to do. We need to make a room in order to walk through it. So we're going to call this an entity type room, maybe? Or space? Let's call it space, because that's what it is. It's space. So we have an entity type space, and that's kind of going to be a very special type of entity. It's what's going to carve out pretty much all of our world there. So that's kind of interesting. And I guess one of the nice things is we've already kind of introduced this notion that we have a sort of complex collision volume, so we can actually have a single space entity can actually be concave as well. It can sort of be shaped however we want. So that's kind of interesting to some degree. I don't know how much we'll take advantage of that necessarily, but we'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and give us the ability to create these space entities, and then I guess I'll just render them kind of uglily. I don't know how to say ugly in that way. Ugly. I want to say uglily. And so we can kind of see that we, in fact, you know, do have them in there, and that they are really in the place we think they are, let's say. So if I go in here and copy one of these rectangle calls, right, I'm just doing basically the same stuff that we did with the, stairwell where we're drawing those rectangles. I'm going to say that this is our entity type space. We're going to go ahead and push some rectangles on that define where this guy actually is. And so what I'll probably do is say, for each of his collision bounds, right, each of the things that are in his whatever the collision group, right, sort of for each volume count, I'm going to draw that volume. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to say loop over these guys, right? Pretty basic here. This is the entity collision volume count. Wow, not a good top completion day, huh? You know what? I'm feeling constrained. I'm feeling constrained here, people. I like to be constrained. There we go. Let's get this going. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull out those volumes one at a time, and we are going to draw them one at a time. Because computers pretty much have to do one thing. Some of you can do multiple things in parallel, but each one of those things is still doing it one at a time. Very single focus these computers are. So I want to take this volume and I want to figure out where it is. I feel like one thing that would be nice, and I don't know if this is going to be, I feel like this has happened enough times, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Instead of accessing them this way, I want to do something where I can say get camera or get region space volume, where I just say, look, here's a collision, here's a volume index for this entity, right? Just give me back what it would be in region space, so I don't have to do the thing where I add the offset and whatever, right? Just give it back to me, and so I can use it directly. So that way its offset P is just its actual position, and I don't have to deal with offsetting it by the entity thing, or if the entity had some scaling, it could scale the dimension for me too, or whatever else, right? So I'm going to do that just to give myself a little more leeway. So if I do that, right, Oh, you know what, though? I picked a really bad time to produce that, because it turns out I don't even have to do that, because this will do that movement for me. Ugh, my bad. Because these are already in entity space. This push rect actually takes in entity space. Well, so much for that. I thought I was going to I was trying to be helpful, you know. Shows you what you get. You try to be helpful, and then it turns out your help is not wanted.
I can't see the value out of it because everywhere that we're doing that, it like distracts from whatever is actually happening. I'm trying to find another example of this. I don't even don't really see us doing it in here anymore. Or I guess it's all right here where all of that happens, and it would be nice for that to happen up front, I guess. I don't know. It would be nice to just totally encapsulate all of that offset stuff so that it's never in the actual logic of the thing that we're doing here, which is preparing to draw, right? Okay.
Right? Your help is just not wanted. And you feel bad about it afterwards, but that's just how it goes. So if I go ahead here and pass the volume dimensions, I can pass just the x and y of that. We don't care about the z so much right now. And then if I pass that offset as well, again, don't really care about the z at the moment.
And this must be right, because that's the offset p from the space. Well, oh, it's not offset p. I thought it was called offset p. It wants me to make this addressable, right? No? I think it is called offset p. Okay, maybe not. Okay, that definitely is an offset p. What is this error then complaining about? Cannot assign to, okay. Okay, so the dim is a v2, but I think we need to pass in the whole thing here.
I just want to see the rectangle at the location of the entity. I feel like that should...
Oh, I see. It's because... Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because those two parameters are still split up for him. The x, y, and then he's just passing in 0 for z, so we might have to say that offset p is... We might have to override the z being passed in here to 0, but hopefully we don't. I'll just wait and see. Then we want to change the color of that rectangle. It's going to be like a cyan, it looks like, type deal.
Be sufficient. This is going to be a pointer now because I didn't do the little fancy thing that I was going to do that would have been cool, and then it all came crashing down. So that's offset p, and there's our program. So now what we need to do is actually make one of these entities. So when we're actually creating rooms, we got to create some empty space for our rooms. And so really that's pretty straightforward. All we have to do is just make a series of these that overlap. We don't even have to be particularly conscientious about it right now because that's really something more for when we do for world gen, when we actually are going to start placing those things. We can think a little bit more about it. But so if we go ahead and here and say, all right, we've got tile x, tile y, that's going to loop over this. Before we do that for a given screen, right, we should go ahead and add this empty space. So what I want to do is I want to, instead of add wall, right, I want to be able to do add space, where I can add in some space that is, I don't know how I want to specify this. I guess I want to specify an abs tile x, abs tile y, like range, basically, right? So I want to do something like this, where I'm going to go from the min and the max, between the min and the max kind of a thing. So abs tile z, I think, is just, yeah, so it's where we're at there. So it'd be something like this. We want to go from...
Make sure I get all this put in here correctly. So we're going to pass in the game state like usual. I guess we have a screen x here, which we will multiply by the tile we're on, but I don't really understand how that's going to work. Oh, I see. He just copied and pasted that in. So I don't know what that's going to be. And then we have the screen y times the tile y, something like that. And then, yeah, abs tile z. Okay.
Tile x, tile y, abs tile z. Excuse me. Need a little more tea. I want to be able to go from this point, basically, to, I guess, how much empty space do we actually want? So for width and height, I guess we would just, maybe we just specify the corner, and then we specify the width and height. Because the width and height is going to be like that tile depth in meters, right? So we probably have something like this, where we're going to say, yeah, here's that width and height. Now, of course, this would be passing that in as meters, which we don't really want. So maybe I'm going to I'll say that. It's one of them high or something like that. That seems reasonable-ish. Although now that I think about it, we probably don't quite want it to go that high, right? Because we want some space that's solid that you're not allowed to move through, and that's the floor, right? So there's, essentially the floor is not infinitely thin. We might as well give it some thickness because we can. So if I was to do that, I guess I would say, let's say that it's, 9F tall, and that'll be in tiles, right? And so because these are all in tiles, and this is in tiles as well, right? So yeah, so let's take a look at that, and I'll pass these in so that you're allowed to pass in fractional tile widths if you want. I don't know, not the best way to specify this, I admit that, but again, I don't really want to spend a lot of time on the world gen stuff now, because that's going to be a whole big thing that we do that we'll kind of get into that'll be a lot better than what we're doing now, and so I don't really want to spend a lot of time thinking about it right now, because it's just not that productive to do so. So all right, so let's go ahead and put that in here. We'll make an add space that does exactly what we just said, and all this is going to do is just carve out a region of the room, a region of the world, and say you can walk here, and that's going to be.
So we don't have tile X and Y here, so I'm not sure what he plans to do with that. Maybe he's just going to move the call somewhere else. But for now, we'll just pretend that that's not a problem and carry on. Wasn't there a bug on Wednesday that man, I can't remember. Maybe that was from Monday. Yeah, I think that was on Monday. I think we're good. Never mind. Scratch that.
Sort of our abs tile X, our abs tile Y, our abs tile Z. So this, I guess we should say this is the min tile X, min tile Y, and min tile Z, like so. And I don't really know, to be honest with you. I kind of feel like we almost want that to be a little more. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not loving this, I'll be honest with you. I'm not loving this way of specifying this. It's giving me the creeps, it's true. But, what are you going to do? So width, or I should say dim X, or tile dim X, I guess. Tile count X, that's a good one. Tile count Y, tile count Z, like so. And so, yeah, the reason I don't love this is because we're typically using this chunk position from tile position that's used to add entities into the world like that, and we presumably would still want to do that, but then we just want the size to be based on these two things. So now we got a situation where we have to think about that, and that's kind of annoying. So I don't know, like maybe let's, for now, again, to keep things simple, maybe we'll do it the other way. We'll say this is going to be like a center tile point, right? Like this, and then this is going to be sort of more like this. Maybe that's this way. Dim X, dim Y. So it'll go from that center out, and maybe that'll just be a little bit easier for us to specify. Again, for now, we're going to have to think through much later on how we want to actually do this generation. When we kind of have the world generating, we'll have an idea of what will be easier for us to do and how we want to do it. All right, so I suppose in this case we can actually reuse our room collision as well. Like basically every room could use the same collision, and that would be kind of nice. So we could just call that standard room collision. I hadn't thought about that. That would actually mean that when we add space, we don't have to do any of this stuff. We can just have kind of the standard a few brushes, and they just get reused, which is kind of interesting. Hadn't considered it. I guess that is kind of nice, actually. Yeah, I like that. So let's go ahead and say that maybe this actually just works literally exactly the same way. Everything can just work. There doesn't have to be anything particularly special going on here. We'll do it exactly the same way that we were doing it before. We'll get the absolute position. We'll add the space to it, and we will use that standard room collision. And so we'll call this add standard room. Yeah, I had not considered that. That's kind of interesting. And so we'll add a flag here, and the flag will be something like empty space, I guess, right? Or like traversable. I don't know, something like that. Traversable. Is that an I, or how do you spell traversable? Traversable. Traverse-able, of course, it's an A-B-L. All right. Traversable. So I had it right. Then that's it. That would just work, I think. So then what we need to do is we need to add that traversable flag, and that'll be...
Okay. It started out really confusing, and then it just got really trivial at the end, which is all fine with me. That's messed up. Whoops, this should be auth the results, and then that just means, wait a minute. Is it off of the, low sim flags? That's where I find that. But traversable is not a flag yet, so we got to go over here and add it.
thing that we use when we're in the collision detector. That's actually going to be in sim region, obviously. Let's see here. Z supported, and then we have traversable. Okay. These are going to definitely have to be cleaned up a little bit because we've got more stuff now than we probably need. We've kind of unwound some of our hacks. Like Z supported probably won't have to happen anymore, right? That'll probably just go away.
I should hope so, because now we got movable, non-spatial, collides, Z supported, traversable. I mean, good lord. That is a lot having to do with just like, can I walk onto, through, or be blocked by this thing?
And so, you know, we'll probably be able to do some stuff like collides probably won't need to be there either, because now entities have a collision volume. You could just set their volume count to 0 and they won't collide with anything. So, you know, to do Casey collides and Z supported, collides and Z supported probably can be removed now soon, I would think. So, now that we said this thing is traversal, what we need to do is make that standard room collision, right? Because that's not there yet. And we also have to do, in here, we're going to have to change the way we're doing this a little bit. We would not be passing this anymore. We'll be passing that center. So what that's going to be is, that is going to be this right here, tiles per width, tiles per height. It's going to basically be, we want the screen X plus a half, right? We want to basically make, we want to basically be the center of the room is where this empty space actually is, right? So we want to go to the corner and then a half more, if that makes sense. So let's do that.
That seems straightforward to me. Carve that by 2. Same thing with the height. And we're caught up. Me sad. Me try to keep my mind busy by coding instead of fixing the real issue. Yeah, I mean, that can happen sometimes. I hope if that's the situation you're in, that you're, you know, able to find a constructive way to, you know, get out of that exact problem. It's too easy to fall into that trap when what you do is code, you know, for your job, for work, that sort of thing. Even if it's a hobby, you know, if it's something that you really enjoy, it's too easy to be like, oh, because there's always going to be more things to code. You know what I mean?
And leave that as our room definition. And then we just need to make that standard room be correct. And so this is standard room. We know we've got a standard room collision here. And then when we do our wall collision, we just want to do that same thing again, standard room. And that's going to be the tile depth in meters times some smaller amount, right? We said 9, something like that.
A room collision. Yeah, because we can collide with rooms now. What is the problem here? Oh, that's right. That's why he was casting all of those to floats. Are those not all floats? What happened here? Oh, they're eyes. They're in 32s.
Was what it was going to be. And then the tile side in meters, it was going to be in our weird kind of notion here, our sort of crazy constants, tiles per width and tiles per height. It's going to be that many wide and high, right? Something like that. Now, that...
Okay, let's go add that collision. It's not a game state, it's just a regular state. Do I just do it now? It's been a long time coming. Okay, what is this now? That's right, standard. I'm just going to new line that. Standard room collision. Okay, and it's actually that same call. Make simple grounded collision. Standard room. And then just multiply that out. Oh no. Yep, that's too long. It must be fixed. Okay. That just looks ridiculous. Maybe I can do this. Yeah, let's do that. It still looks ridiculous. This is some really inconsistent formatting now, but can't be helped. I must have missed why. Was this always like that? I must have just did that and I missed what he was saying. Yeah, if I wasn't coding or interested in some games, I would have been doing drugs at this point. Yeah, I mean, in some real sense, the addiction to problem solving can be your drug, right? Especially when your income is tied into it. You know, you're just always pursuing, well, I mean, if I just keep going, keep solving problems, keep doing things. That's why, you know, where you hear about these people who are 10xers, 100xers, whatever, you know, they're spoken about mythically, but I think if all you do is live to extract value out of yourself by solving problems through code, you're going to, I mean, it's just a sad way to exist, right? You only have one life, and if that's all you ever do, and I've come precariously close. Like if I didn't have my family, right, I would have easily been in that position. And even with my family, to pull me out of that, I have been in places where it was something to do with the product that I'm working on or my day job, where I found myself just like so locked into, like, if I just, like, I'm right there, I can see the finish line with this big, you know, feature or project that I'm trying to finish that pertains to all of this. And if I just get there faster, then I can relax. But really, that's just like a little lie you tell yourself, right? I'm just like, no, actually, this is what I really want to be doing right now, because I get this rush from like getting, you know, to the finish line. And then you get there and you're like, well, what the hell is this all for? And I was just talking about this earlier this week, where if you throw more of your time, like your day-to-day time, at a problem, like a big problem, a problem that really matters, it doesn't actually get solved any faster. So like, you know, those times where I was grinding myself to a pulp trying to get that new thing done or wrap up that feature, whatever, fix that bug or do that optimization, whatever it is, it didn't make me feel any better to get it done a couple days sooner than I otherwise would have if I had just gone at a normal pace. And you know, you do that enough times, and either you see it or you don't. Obviously, if there's nobody to tell you that what you're doing seems wrong and not good for you, then it's going to be harder to like be self-aware about that. But it's something that I'm far more acutely aware of now than I was, say, 5 years ago. And that's to say nothing about all of the cultural issues stemming around people who, anything that's like tangential to like a company that purports itself to be a technology company or a software company or something. Like, I think really reflecting on this stuff over the past year, I think that the hiring strategies and tactics that are used they are so far from being the way they actually need to be. And that's not a unique criticism that I have. Plenty of people have said something exactly like that. And I'm not even saying I have the answer either, but I think it's bigger than just software, I guess is what I'm saying. It's about like humans in general and how we use it and how we relate to each other with it. Like, I was doing an interview process for a job that seemed like it could have been an interesting gig to switch to about 7 months ago, right around the time my second was born. And so I was trying to juggle my job, my responsibilities to my startup, my responsibilities to my family, all of these things, while also entertaining this new position. And I got a few interviews deep. I had a conversation that was more like cultural. It was still kind of in that technical phase, but it was also into that cultural step of the interview process. And I thought things were going pretty well, but I did get a weird feeling at that stage. I was like, I get the feeling that this guy doesn't like me. That was like the overwhelming sensation. I came walking away from that interview, and lo and behold, I heard nothing from them after that interview went down. And thankfully I didn't pour a whole lot of effort into that, but it was really just like the trying to figure out how to do all of the things responsibly and not let anybody down, right? Well, and again, this is right around the time my second was born. So if anybody had the most going on at that point in time that was involved in that process, it was me. But then they just ghosted me, and then lo and behold, recently the CEO reached out to me and asked me if I was still interested. And I was like, you guys didn't even contact me to let me know that either you closed that position that was open before or you chose somebody else. And then he informed me at that time that they chose somebody else. And I was like, why would I entertain talking to you guys about taking a job when you were so, the lack of respect that was shown for my time and the effort that I put in to entertain that job as a potential new job for me, it just demonstrated to me is like, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm not going to be ghosted twice, fool me once, fool me twice, that whole thing. Can't be fooled again. Yeah, it's a serious problem. It's this whole year I have been thinking more deeply about just how far reaching it is beyond, because that's not that particular experience. That's not even like the worst experience. Like you can find all kinds of terrible anecdotes, and it's not unique to people that do software engineering by any means. But anyway, that's my soapbox. I'll get off it. What was I doing here? I just want to make sure I got this punched in right. Looks good. Yeah, like I said, I don't know. I want to hear what his rationale was for punching in that 9/10 calculation here.
Again, standard room. And that's going to be the tile depth in meters times some smaller amount, right? We said 9, something like that was what it was going to be. And then the tile side in meters, it was going to be in our weird kind of notion here, our sort of crazy constants, tiles per width and tiles per height. It's going to be that many wide and high, right? Something like that. Now, that doesn't give us any overlap. If you think about the way this is going to work, if we have two rooms that are next to each other, there isn't any overlap here at all. There's just an infinitely thin line. And I don't know, to make it easier on our collision detection math, I don't know if we want to do something where we would actually make it, a little more forgiving than that, right? Something where we're going to allow you to make the rooms, the rooms would have a little bit of overlap there, so that it was easier to make that transition on the math. But for now, we'll just start out with making them exactly a butt, and then we'll look at that math later on when we're being a little bit more robust about things and thinking them through a little bit better. So that makes that. And now,
maybe my mind is just mush because it's 3:30 on a Friday afternoon, but I did not catch why he used that number or used that fractional specifically. But shouldn't worry too much about it. Hopefully the reason will become clear later on.
In theory, we actually should see some giant rectangles if we didn't mess anything up. Hey, look, we do. Of course, it makes it hard to see anything else.
Okay, I guess it makes sense that we're done. We did the work to draw it. We did the work to add it. Let's see if we've got a world of blue. It's a blue world. That's not right at all. This is all kinds of wrong. And why is there a tree here? It's because I did not change. Yeah, that's all it is. I added a. Let's see. Let me get this. Make sure I get this right. Standard inside of this call. Yeah, when I copied this, I didn't change this to be a space. Okay, now we should be good. It's still not right. First of all, it's green. It's supposed to be blue. What happened there? Space. So I guess this was still a 1. Okay, so now I think we're going to have the right color. We're drawing a space the way we should be. What the hell? Did I not save it? Come on now. Do the thing that I told you to do, computer. Yeah, okay, so that's the right color. But the size is definitely not right. So did I forget to... yeah, when we do this call here... right here, this just seems like I didn't add in a coefficient of some kind correctly. Standard collision, oh, it's because I didn't, it's using the wall collision. Okay, same exact dirt, same exact problem. There we go. Nope. Still not right. Standard room collision, please. Now I think we're good. I think that's right. That's right-ish. If I can I go? Yeah, I can go up. And you can kind of see... I don't know, the blue on this level kind of seems wrong, or maybe that's just oh, it's because it's extending to the ceiling, is that right? It's just not quite the right mental mapping of what I think we want to present our understanding of a room as.
You should see some giant rectangles if we didn't mess anything up. Hey, look, we do. Of course, it makes it hard to see anything else, but that is sort of what we wanted to see. And they look like they are maybe not quite in the right place, though, on the top. Oh, but that may just be because of the Z. I'm not entirely sure. Let's hop up to the next level and see if that's in a more sane spot. And it does look like it's in a pretty sane spot, actually. Now, the question would be what happens here. I'm not sure if I'm actually colliding with that entity. What is actually happening there? Like, why can't I go through there? Does anyone know? I have no idea. I'm interested to know. Let's take a quick look. I want to know if I'm actually colliding that, because we didn't set its collides to be true, right?
Empty Code just said, I'm just at a weird point. I have been thinking about someone for about a month or two, but just refusing to approach her since I'm just a little scared. I don't feel confident in where I'm at in life. Weird place and time for such talk. I have just accepted the fact that I kind of need to move on for now, but I still can't forget her. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what your relationship with this person is, but you never know when the smallest act of just, like, you know, going for it, you have no idea how far-reaching those consequences might be. And as an example of exactly that, when I met my wife, she was my waitress at breakfast one morning at a local diner here in town, and I had never met her before in my life, but I just had this feeling that I couldn't shake, and so I did something that I've never done, which is that I wrote my number down on the receipt. I don't know how common that is to do anymore. Maybe it's kind of fallen out of vogue now that everybody meets people on Tinder or, you know, whatever. But I did that, and because I was with friends and I didn't want to get rejected in front of them in case she wasn't interested in me, I just got up and ran as soon as she took the receipt, pretty much expecting never to hear from her again. And then I got a text later that afternoon, and then we started dating, and the rest is history. So you never know. But obviously, if you throw yourself out there, it probably makes sense to have some kind of notion. She should have some notion that you at least exist. You know what I mean? If she's somebody you've never even talked to before, how you approach that is everything, right? That's why I left the note on the receipt, because I didn't want to put her on the spot in front of the boys and make her feel like she needs to turn me down just out of like, you know, because I put her on the spot. Like, you never know. It's just like one of those things where you don't, now she's actually watching the stream, and now she knows I'm talking about her. Yeah, it's don't get out of your head is what I would say. Get outside of your head and just trust this thing right here, and that'll tell you whether you actually do need to move on or not. Because the second I stop listening to this is a valuable tool. In particular, the left side of your brain, right, the left hemisphere. It's very good at helping you navigate things that are mechanical. But the right side of your brain is actually kind of more like where the heart is, and it helps you navigate the things that are not navigable. Is that a word? The second you stop thinking so hard about it, or fixating so much on it, and lean into the more human side of yourself, that's what's been eye-opening for me, just about doing this stream, actually, because this stream is the first kind of programming, and Handmade Hero in general, and doing stuff with games, it's the first sort of programming I've done in a long time where I just did it for its own sake, and I wasn't doing it to complete a project for work or for the product that I've been working on, in a serious way too. Like, I've dabbled in, I've tried out new languages, but only like in a very passing sort of just like, oh, I'm going to see what this is about, do a hello world. Like, this is the first project of any seriousness that I have entertained, again, where it's not specifically linked to some kind of financial incentive. Now, there's like all kinds of possibility that could emerge from me just doing this, right? And I have a good feeling about that. I have an even better feeling about it now that I'm a few months into doing this stream than I was when I started. When I started it, I kept second guessing myself. On the first day I did the stream, I wanted to quit because it went so poorly because of internet issues that I had. But then I tinkered with things, and then things kind of buffed out. It's still, the stream still crashes quite a bit, but I'm glad I stuck with it, because I was just kind of following my curiosity and again, following like the feeling of the thing rather than just being inside my own head about all of it. Anyway, hopefully that is constructive in some way. I know that is much easier said than done. Believe me, I know how much easier that is said than it is done. And to actually do it, you have to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, and that basically just means do something other than what you would normally do. And that might mean go and talk to this person. It might just mean go for a walk. It might just mean go for a hike. Do literally anything. Get away from the computer for sure. The more I find that the more that I realize I don't have to always be, like you pointed out as soon as you came into the chat, trying to keep your mind busy instead of fixing the real issue. Sometimes fixing the real issue is to just stop thinking and stop keeping your mind busy and just kind of let your humanity come back, right? Let the part of you that makes you human return to your psyche a little bit and lean into that. And then you'll find that even doing the code actually gets easier. Because a lot of programming actually is navigating a feeling that you're writing the right thing. Obviously, you have to understand the spec of whatever it is you're working on, the APIs, whatever. But at the end of the day, you need to know what you need to have a good understanding of what you don't know, so you can feel your way through solving what the problem is, right? So like all of this stuff is connected, and ultimately that's what it's all about, is like seeking out that human connection. Because ultimately, what are you even doing anything with code for? You're probably trying to work on a problem to solve that makes people's lives easier or better in some way, ideally, right? I mean, there's the financial incentive to it. In particular, and this is probably why a lot of people, like, one of the things that dissuaded me from entertaining games development at all for a long time, I know I'm going way off the rails here, but we're approaching the end of the day and we're pretty good on time, so I just thought I'd share this part. I don't know if I brought this up on stream before. One of the things that dissuaded me from doing this for a long time, even though I've been programming for about 10 years now, right, is that every time I would go and look at people's experiences with doing game development, games programming of any kind, you would just see how downtrodden these people are. You know, I've been working on this game for 6 months and it sucks. I've been, you know, blah, blah, blah. I released my game on Steam and it's got, 15 people bought it and 12 of them hate it. It's like, you probably should have taken that initiative towards the journey of what it is to like build games and learn game development from a place of like, I'm curious about exploring this and learning and having fun with it, and not just thinking about the end goal of like, I'm going to go release this game and I'm going to sell, 10 million copies. I'm going to make the next Minecraft, or I'm going to make the next Undertale. The people who do things like that, generally they do it because they're pursuing curiosity and they're pursuing this connection to this thing that they don't even fully understand. Maybe they're just trying to make something that they think is fun, something that they think is unique and is like their own way of expressing themselves and putting forth some kind of creative endeavor. Because as much as many games aren't that, however many games aren't actually that, like a lot of games are just trying to be a product that sells as much as possible. At the end of the day, they are, to either a little or a large extent, some act of creative expression, in the same way that books and television, books and film are, music, like those things are created. That's where, like, I don't know, I've noticed this trend over my whole life where like now we like ridicule people. Today it's people were saying it 20 years ago, don't get me wrong, but today now, like when people talk about like someone with an art degree, right? They kind of say, they say, oh, this person has an art degree. They talk about things like that in a derogatory fashion. In particular, if they aren't actually doing like an art profession with that degree, if they're just working at a grocery store or whatever. It's this devaluing of what actually makes us human that I think has put us in this position that we're in now, where all we think about is the material and getting to that end result of like, I've got the FANG job, all my problems are solved. And then you listen to all these stories these people post online about how they, worked for Amazon for a week and then they cried themselves into quitting, and or any number of other anecdotes you can draw from. So, yeah. My advice is to be human. To sum up that whole rant in one sentence, try to be more like a human being and less like a machine.
So in theory, that should not be the case, but I want to see if that's actually what's happening there, or if we had some bug from before that we weren't handling. So what I did is I hopped up to the next level there, like so, and I tried to go through here, and I could go through. So it seems like we're collision detecting against those entities, even though collides was not set, which suggests to me that we have a bug in there, which is that collides is not actually being checked properly, and so I would like to see why that is. Let's double check to make sure. Yeah, we're not setting it because there's standard room and just traversable is being set. I didn't do something stupid, did I? Like make traversable be the same value? Why did I set that? Why am I setting these that way? We don't need to set those to go up by powers 2. But yet, even so, doesn't matter. We weren't overwriting this or anything. And so, as far as I can tell, that's just a straight up bug. So let's see.
I can't remember. You know what? I think I actually did see that bug, and then I just forgot all about it. Maybe, if I'm not mistaken, what he saw was that. Oh no, I actually can go through there. What's that about? wonder what I'm missing, because... Well, maybe that bug was there. I think it was when we were still in the middle of doing all of the Z collision volume, all of the last stuff we've done in the last week. I think that bug must have gone away, but he's still seeing it. There's another bug where I randomly get trapped on some of the trees at the bottom of a room. But I guess I haven't tested to see if that's still around either. No, it's still there. It's right there. I don't know if that's the same problem he's seeing or not, though. I have no idea.
Why we're actually colliding against those standard rooms. It doesn't seem to make much sense to me. So let's see, were we checking the collides flag here? So we're not even checking the collides flag. We don't even check that flag anymore. We were just full on ignoring that flag entirely. And so when we call can collide, I strongly suspect that what we probably should have been doing here is saying something like, you know, if A, something like this, right? If A collides and B collides, then we can actually do this determination, right? Otherwise, we just assume that they can't collide.
So I don't know if that's the same, if that's going to address the same problem that I was just showcasing. But we'll see. So if our A entity, how would I do this? If dot collides in A flags and collides in B flags, the oldest is already awake from his nap. How dare he do this? Guys, sleep has been all over the place lately.
Because we really don't want anyone colliding with those things. That's not good. So that's fine. There we go. So here we are. Oh, I fell through the stairwell. Whoops. So there we go. Much better. Now, it's going to be...
Now, that's really weird that he was seeing that. I guess I could have checked to see... let me do this. If I go and add that call back in... whoa. I did a Python true just then. That was my work brain leaking into the stream. Add standard... Oh, in the wrong file. Yeah, if we add that back in, do I get that issue? No. So I don't know what that's about. Why he was seeing that just then and I don't. Kind of hard to tell with the big blue rooms. Okay, well, I guess this can't possibly hurt me by adding that in too. I wonder if it could have something to do with... No, because his implementation is fine. Yeah, his implementation is just doing the older slow method. Whereas mine has the, I'm adding the rules in both directions to make finding them easier after the fact. But like the actual logic of how that works shouldn't be any different.
Possible to see. So what I would like to do is I'd like to make something that allows it a little bit so that we can see our regions a little bit better. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of make a real simple modification to our push rect call as soon as the 5-minute warning subsides. I'm going to make a little modification to our push rect call. And that push rect call is going to essentially do a series of push recs. So like push rect outline, something like that. And what that's going to do is that's just going to do a push piece for each of the four lines of rectangles. It's going to push like 4 separate rectangles, basically, so that we can see an outline of the region instead of this big solid region that obscures everything that we're trying to look at. And again, since we don't really have a renderer yet, you know, this would be the kind of thing the renderer would take care of it for us. But until we get there, we've got to make do with what we have. So it looks to me like the way this is working is it just pushes the location of the thing and then an offset that's going to spread out from. And so in order to make this work, what I would want to do is I'd want to do 2 batches, top and bottom, right, and left and right. The top and bottom are going to be wherever I was. The offset I want to basically move over by whatever. I want to basically move up and down by that dim, however big the rectangle was, right? I'll draw this out for you for those of you who don't write this kind of code.
Let him get to that in a second. I just want to finish getting us set up to do this whole rect outline thing. So we do the offset minus, yeah, how would I do this? Can I just do 0 dim y like that? You want 3 values. That's right, because that is just a V2 for him, but it's a V3 for me. That's still 0. All the rest of these can be 0, but so if it's top and bottom, this one here is going to be plus. Is that right? And then, but we still have to figure out how to handle the Z. I guess it should just be 0, right? Because it's just going to be passed in the same, because we're not modifying it all. So yeah, that's the same thing as passing it straight through. Okay. Well, yeah, the other way you would do it is you would modify the Y ahead of time. But this seems fine. Okay, and so we're just going to do the same thing here, but in the X. Left and right. So I think that pretty much gets us to where we're trying to go. Nope. That was wrong. That was not, well, it's because I didn't even actually change the call. Space, yeah, right here. Push rect outline, and then maybe that's good. Nope, still wrong. So clearly I did not think it all the way through.
However big the rectangle was, right? I'll draw this out for you for those of you who don't write this kind of code very often. Grab my color back. So what I want to do here is I've got a rectangle, and I want to make rectangles that go around it like this. So I want to make like a rectangle here, right? And a rectangle here to start with, like so. And so I've got this, and I've got the dimension. So what I want to do is I want to move up to where the rectangle was, its dimension, right? Its dimension y. So this is the dimension in y. Well, it's half the dimension in y, right? I want to go half dimension in y up, and I want to go out to along the dimension x, back and forward. So its dimension in x is going to be the same, right? The thing that I draw as dimension x is going to be the same. Its dimension y is going to be however thick I want that line to be, and its position is going to be whatever position the rectangle is in minus that dimension y, right? I'm just constructing that case. So what I want to do is I want to, again, take that offset. I want to move it by whatever the dimension is in y that I've been told to draw. And then instead of the dimension that I was going to draw, I want to take the dimension in x, leave that the same, and then do like a thickness parameter, right? And for the thickness parameter, I don't know what this would actually be. It's a good question. The dimension, I don't know.
I see. I didn't think about the fact that I was pushing or passing the dim straight through. Okay, thickness is going to be whatever he says it's going to be, I guess. We'll just say for now this is 0.1 or maybe, I don't know, 0.2. And then, yeah, so this should be like that. Is that right? I guess this has to be explicitly made a float 32. And we do the same thing, but for the y over here. And maybe I got it right this time. I always like to just see if I'm thinking about things correctly or not. That seems, I mean, that's closer, but you can tell that this is wrong, right? I mean, why are the rooms, they're like being cut in half? So it means like one of these should probably be negative. Is that right? I'm not sure.
Know that the dimension, what is the dimension, since this is all really ad hoc, we've never defined like what is the dimension even in when it draws the rectangle. I'm not sure, and so we kind of have to see, is that in pixels? It is in pixels. I'm sorry, it is not in pixels, it's in meters. So we want something very thin, right? We want not very many meters at all. We want like a centimeter, let's say, or a decameter. I don't know exactly, but let's say a centimeter for now is how thick that's going to be. And again, this is just going to be something that we do for both directions. So we want the top and the bottom, and those are exactly the same, just offset, the exact same kind of rectangle. And then we want to do the same thing again, but this time we want to do it with the x, right, instead of the y, to make the left and right side. So this time we're going to have that y dimension becomes the thickness for us, right? And so that's all I want to do there. And now when we do push rect, we can also do outlines of rectangles, and that'll make it easier to see that stuff. So let's see if that worked at all. Right, we're kind of running out of time here. That did not. I do not see any rectangles. Oh, because they're too thin, it looks like. Well, let's take a look. Let's make that a little thicker. Push rect outline, like so. Just want to make sure. It also is offset. When I do a push piece, offset is multiplied meters pixels in there, right? Yeah, it is. So in theory, that should be okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and make thickness a little thicker. I just want to see what happens there. All right, so there's, and we're still a little buggy here because that's just drawing one line there. That doesn't make any sense.
Okay, good. So he still has a problem. I'm sure it's simple, but I mean, I was thinking, I saw where he was going with it, and I was thinking of it in exactly the same terms. But yeah, mine just looks different because my rooms are laid out differently. But it's got to be really close.
Let me double check what I have done incorrectly, because I have done something incorrectly. I can tell you that right now. Let's see. So we've got the thickness. We have the dimension in x. We are drawing. So I'm not sure why we're not seeing more of that show up. We're only seeing our left and, well, I guess just our left would show up. We're not ever even seeing any of these show up at all, which is kind of a little bit odd, I would say. So I'm not sure why that actually is the case. And our Q&A is supposed to begin now. So I don't know, can we debug this in just a few seconds? I'm not sure. But maybe we'll just take a quick look and see. Because like I said, I don't like to really leave bugs till the next day if I can avoid it. Unfortunately, when you're only programming for an hour on stream, it can be kind of tough to actually make sure that you get everything that you wanted. So push rect outline, here we go, right? Let's see what we end up with here in terms of our pieces. So here's our piece group, right? And there's our pieces. So we're going to go through and push these. We push on a piece, a piece, a piece, a piece. So we do have 4 pieces that got pushed. And let's see what they are. So we have 2 of them. We've got one with that y offset, one with this y offset. We have, now is the offset, we have to make sure that the offset's actually still in meters. We want to make sure that the offset is not getting multiplied in some weird way, I suppose. But it's getting multiplied up in here, so that should be fine. Right? Is there something, let me double check something. When we actually draw our pieces, what's the definition for the rectangle? Let's go take a look. Because I believe we said before that it was all janky, remember? I think we talked about this before. So when we draw a rectangle, we do the center minus the half dim. I did forget to multiply the dim by half, so there is that. I don't know if that's the entirety of our problem, though. But let's see, center minus half dim, center plus half dim. The center is what I think it should be, the entity ground point. Does look good. But I did forget to multiply. I said that it was half, but then I didn't actually do half. So we should actually fix that like so. But I don't know that that would account for the entirety of our problem, unfortunately.
Yeah, that seems pretty obvious in retrospect, doesn't it? Because if that's the whole dimension of the rectangle, we're going out a whole length down. So it's putting everything, it's like splitting everything out twice as far. Or it's drawing the rect outline. It's just drawing like a, a straight line essentially to frame a whole rectangle as an outline instead of being filled. I bet Raylib has a pretty neat call, right? That just does the same thing, but it's called RL dot rect outline, draw rect outline, something like that. That's all we're doing here is something to that effect, right? And of course, I can't make a single change without wrapping now, can I? Okay. That, I am going to go ahead and guess, is the whole issue. Sure looks like it. So that's nice. We've got our rooms here illustrated in the way they are bound. I honestly don't, I mean, other than like, I guess it's just like what he said. We're kind of implementing a way to debug stuff, because there's plenty of other reasons we might want to draw like an outline of a rectangle like this, right? Or a square, as the case may be. But I think that's pretty much it.
So let's go ahead and keep going here. Let's run that and recompile. So there we go. Is that the entirety of our problem? That was the entirety of our problem. All right, so that wasn't so hard to debug. There we go. It does fit the room nicely, so that's good. And we can go ahead and go up here. The top one's drawn wrong because it's not using the Z fudge. When we go upstairs, it should be drawn right. There it is, and we can go through and into the next room. So now we've got those boundaries in our room set up. So that sets us up for tomorrow, doing what I said we were going to do, where we can actually now treat those as in-out. And that'll set us up pretty good for creating some multi-stage rooms. And so maybe that's, if we have time tomorrow to do that, we'll do that. If we don't, that'll be our Monday thing as well. All right, so now we can go and actually start things up. Let me get the Q&A going here.
All right, well, it's been another good week for Odinmade Hero. Really not as bad as probably the past 2 weeks before this week in terms of just like the enormity of the changes it felt like we were making. And again, getting really close. It's got to be like midway through the 80s or something like that, that he starts working on more on the renderer code. And so that'll get back into some topics that do more interesting things presentation-wise for us to look at. And there's something more satisfying about the progress you make from seeing actual change on the screen, right? As you move forward with the implementation. But it'll really only be scratching the surface, and it's still pretty dense, despite the fact that it's, he only gets as deep as like, okay, here's some, surface normal mapping to start setting us up to be able to do lighting and all these things. Like it's really only, the beginning, but it's all these years later and he still hasn't quite finished Handmade Hero. So it's no surprise, right? It's going to be a long journey to get to a point where it's like, oh, okay, I think I have the tools to build a game. And I think I'm more and more okay with that as time goes on here. So thanks for hanging out with me for another stream. Empty Code said, thanks for the stream. You're very welcome. I'm glad you stopped by and chatted for a bit. I know it's programming there is lots of great aspects to it that do us a lot of good in terms of like, making us good at solving problems and then being useful, ideally, where we can make tools and things that make it easier for other people to do what it is that they need to do. But it's all about finding that balance and finding, it's just, I totally understand that place where you're coming from, where it's like, it can be very easy to just get locked into that, frame of mind. It's good to go and be a human. So I hope you find some time to do that this weekend. I'll be back on Monday where we'll kick off day 80. So take care.